Lunacid is an ode to classic first-person dungeon crawlers whose primary inspiration is FromSoftware's pre-Dark Souls era series known as King's Field. And I'm here to tell you, it's amazing even if you haven't played King's Field. Despite the fact that the game isn't even complete yet, Lunacid's unique and foreboding atmosphere, combined with providing the player with an incredible sense of wonder and discovery, has me eagerly awaiting what developer Kira has in store for us upon full release. My name's Johnny Bueno, and let's take a look at Lunacid. Lunacid's initial story can be summed up like this. A giant fish monster comes out of the ocean and poisons the world, reverting humanity back to feudalism. With people desperate to survive in this hellscape, anyone deemed undesirable, like criminals or the sick, are banished to a giant well where there is apparently no way out. Your character is one of those criminals who has been cast into the well for thievery. Once you're through this quick story setup, you'll be greeted by the character creation screen to create your own unique pit dweller. You won't actually see your character as you're essentially just a disembodied hand, but you do get to choose a portrait, or beauty as the game calls it, which you'll see every time you open the game's menu. You have your choice of Knight, Knight 2, Knight 3, Vampire, whatever this is, or you could upload your own picture to engage in roleplay and truly understand the feeling of being unwanted by the world. There's also class options to choose from, 9 in total, with each having their own unique stats, resistances, and starting level. I went with the Cleric so I could enjoy a mix of melee combat and magic casting, which was a fantastic choice that we'll talk more about later. Once I finally took control of my character, I was immediately met with an incredibly foreboding atmosphere just from the first area alone. This is where Lunacid excels, as there's just something about the ambient noise, the music, and the PS1 style graphics that put me weirdly on edge. Or maybe I'm just a coward. Later areas lean far more heavily into trying to make you uneasy, like the Temple of Silence or the Accursed Tomb, but it's the fact that I knew this was the start of a grueling journey down into the well that made the experience from the get-go unlike anything I've felt before. This foreboding feeling was dialed up to 11 when, shortly after the first area, I entered the aforementioned Temple of Silence, which is littered with unmoving corpses with giant holes in their faces. This feeling was then dialed up to 12 when I found out that some of them are in fact alive and very upset that I'm in their temple. In addition to the Temple of Silence, Lunacid does feature a nice variety of zones like a massive underground forest, a spooky vampire castle, a lava pit, or the classic Sea of Blood. Each zone is home to unique enemies, music, and overall ambiance that make finding a new zone feel fairly exciting. There's also Wings Rest, the hub area, where you'll purchase items, perform alchemy, and talk to the local demon girl. One final note, I liked how the game shows you the song and artist name for the music when entering a new area. I thought this was a really nice touch to credit the artist in-game and let the players know what song is currently making them feel uncomfortable. The combat in Lunacid is actually pretty simple. Most encounters at melee range will boil down to a dance of attacking once, dodging or blocking, then attacking again. It doesn't innovate much from its source material, but considering this game is one big love letter to a mostly bygone genre, I wasn't really expecting it to. In addition to melee, there's a handful of range weapons as well as magic, which plays a very crucial role in terms of both combat and overall gameplay. This ties back into what I said earlier about the Cleric being a fantastic choice for a starting class. It has higher intelligence to start, which attributes to not only how much damage spells do in Lunacid, but how fast you cast them as well. And magic in the game is not only necessary to access some areas and damage enemies that can't be hit by a standard weapon, it's also a little overpowered. Seriously, later in the game I picked up this ice spell that was nearly insta-killing enemies even with a fairly modest amount of points invested in intelligence. The same goes for a lightning spell that I picked up partway through the game. I was zapping skeletons like they were nothing, and it actually felt pretty good to do after they spooked me a few hours earlier. There's also a few handy spells that can act as a light source, and even an entire school of magic dedicated to using your own health bar as a resource for casting. I really wasn't expecting such a wide variety of spells to choose from in a game that's still very much in early access. One thing to note is that spells are equipped through wearing rings, and there's only 2 ring slots for your character, so choosing your spells wisely before an encounter is absolutely critical. These spell rings are found primarily through exploration, which plays a huge role in Lunacid. The shop at Wings Rest sells a few weapons and items, but if you want the good stuff, you're gonna need to search for it. Some items are very cleverly hidden, and I honestly don't know how anyone would figure out how to find them without using a guide, but I honestly don't recommend doing this for your first playthrough. Seriously, the sense of discovery in this game is incredible, and I recommend finding what you can on your own for your first time. Most areas contain several secret walls that will have you spamming your E key on every wall you come across to see if it will open up and reveal its goods. The nice thing that Lunacid does is that a small question mark will appear in the corner of your screen when you're in front of one, so they're a little easier to notice, even if you run into one by accident. As you're looking for treasure, you'll no doubt bump into some enemies, which Lunacid overall has a nice variety of, considering the enemies in the game so far are unique to each zone. Not having an abundance of repeat enemies was pretty nice to see, and it made entering a new area all the more exciting as I had no idea what I was going to run into next. In the case of the Accursed Tomb, I literally had no idea what I was running into, as it's home to invisible enemies that can't be damaged by normal weapons. Pretty terrifying, and really leaned into the haunted grave vibe of the area. From what I found, there's only one single boss in the game, which I won't show here to avoid any spoilers. The fight was kind of uninteresting though, as it's pretty easy to stand a distance away and pelt the boss with lightning. Funny enough, after the boss goes down, you'll immediately be met with an end of development sign showing that there's more to come and hopefully some more engaging boss fights. Progression is pretty standard if you're familiar with the typical Souls-like formula, even if this is inspired by games from a pre-Souls-like era. Killing enemies grants experience, and you're awarded stat points to invest into different stats that will power up your character in various ways. We already talked about intelligence, but there's also strength, which increases your maximum health and how much damage you deal with melee weapons. There's also 2 stats tied to survivability, defense, and resistance, and then there's 2 more stats which are almost essential in helping you explore the world of Lunacid. Those stats being dexterity and speed. While dexterity does help you deal more damage with ranged weapons, it also increases your jump height, which lets you access certain areas that would normally be inaccessible without any point investment into this stat. Despite my desire to be a more heavy-hitting, spell-slinging paladin style of character, I couldn't ignore dumping some points into dexterity to help with exploration. This also applies to the final stat, speed, which affects how fast your character moves. Without any stats invested into speed at the start of the game, I felt like I was moving at a snail's pace compared to the end of the game, where I felt like I was rocketing around each zone in comparison. I imagine having maxed out speed feels something similar to a dungeon delving version of Sonic the Hedgehog. One other interesting area of progression is with specific weapons that you can evolve into newer, more powerful ones. This isn't the case for every weapon, but some weapons do have an experience bar that fills by using them in combat. Once the bar is filled, they can be taken to an oil well at Wing's Rest to evolve them into their new shiny form. This is a pretty cool feature as the game encourages players to try out and experiment with different weapons because they just might upgrade into something incredibly useful. Wing's Rest is also home to an alchemist/bartender that will let you perform alchemy to combine 3 ingredient items into something new. Ingredients are found throughout the world, and each zone seems to be home to a unique ingredient that you can take back to the alchemist to see how it can be combined into a usable item. Much like how the game doesn't hold your hand with, well, everything, it's up to you to figure out which ingredient combinations actually work. I went through a ton of trial and error with every item I found during my travels and managed to only make 2 concoctions, some bombs and some poison throwing knives. The game does throw you a bone as every formula you discover will be saved in the alchemy menu for your reference later. I'm going to be honest, I completely forgot about these items after I crafted them, but admittedly it was pretty exciting to discover a new formula after failing 20 times in a row. One final mechanic I want to call out is the Lunacid mechanic. It's situated below your health and mana bar in the character menu and apparently affects your XP gain and how much damage you deal at the cost of taking increased damage. I say apparently as I never actually messed around with this too much. Using certain items or spells will increase your Lunacid percentage, and the higher the percentage, the more the risk versus reward factor increases. Overall, a really interesting mechanic that gives players an added layer of challenge if they're looking to power up their character faster. My experience with Lunacid has shown that it's an early access title worth keeping an eye on. Even in its unfinished state, the atmosphere, world, and sense of discovery are all compelling enough to please even those like myself who have never even played a single Kingsfield game. Whether you're curious about what a pre-Dark Souls era FromSoftware style game is like, or if you're just interested in the new wave of horror games with PS1 style graphics, I think it's worth checking out, especially since it's only $7 on Steam. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and let me know what you think in the comments below. I appreciate every bit of interaction and support as I love making videos like this. So please subscribe if you want to see more, and thank you for watching.